Sometimes life forces you to choose between what others expect and what your heart knows is right. Anna Crawford made that choice 10 years ago when she left everything behind to live alone in the Colorado mountains with only her German shepherd, Scout, for company. The townspeople call her crazy, the woman who traded a normal life for a pile of rocks and empty wilderness. They whisper about her when she comes to town for supplies, shaking their heads at what they see as a life thrown away. Anna collects stones, tends her small garden, and finds peace in the silence that stretches between the peaks. Most days, she believes she made the right choice, but the mountains have been keeping a secret buried deep beneath her family's old cabin. What would you do if the thing everyone mocked you for suddenly became worth millions? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The first light of dawn crept through the tall pines surrounding Anna Crawford's weathered log cabin, casting long shadows across the wooden deck where she sat with her morning coffee. At 60, her hands showed the honest wear of a decade spent working with stone and soil, her silver hair pulled back in a practical bun that had long ago replaced the carefully styled cuts of her former life. Scout, her 6-year-old German shepherd, lay beside her chair, his ears alert to every sound in the mountain stillness. This morning ritual had become sacred to Anna, the quiet moments before the world stirred, when the mountain seemed to breathe with her. She opened her great-grandmother's hand-carved wooden box, a beautiful piece of craftsmanship that had traveled 3 generations to reach her hands. Inside, yellowed letters and old property deeds lay carefully preserved, testaments to her family's long connection to this remote piece of Colorado wilderness. Her fingers traced the carved roses on the box's lid, remembering her great-grandmother's stories about the special nature of this land. As a child, Anna had thought these were just fanciful tales meant to entertain, but living here had taught her that some truths reveal themselves only to those willing to listen with patience. The decision to leave Denver 10 years ago hadn't been sudden, though it had shocked everyone who knew her. Anna had been a successful geological consultant then, her expertise in mineralogy sought after by mining companies and environmental groups alike. She'd had a comfortable home in the suburbs, a respected career, and a husband who shared her love of the outdoors. But Richard's unexpected death from a heart attack had shattered that careful life, leaving her questioning everything she'd thought mattered. The grief had been overwhelming at first. Friends and family had rallied around her, offering comfort and advice about moving forward, about not making any major decisions while mourning. But in the quiet hours when well-meaning visitors went home, Anna found herself thinking about this mountain property she'd inherited years earlier, the same land her great-grandmother had refused to sell despite numerous offers over the decades. She remembered, visiting here as a child, how the silence had felt not empty but full of possibility. Her great-grandmother had walked these trails with her, pointing out different types of rock formations, teaching her to identify minerals by their color and crystal structure. Those childhood lessons had sparked Anna's love of geology, though she'd never connected that early passion to her professional career until much later. Scout stretched and padded over to his water bowl, lapping quietly in the morning stillness. Anna had found him at the Denver animal shelter 2 months after Richard's funeral. A young dog whose previous owner had surrendered him for being too energetic for apartment living. The irony hadn't been lost on her. She was about to make a similar choice, trading confined spaces for wild territory. The transition hadn't been easy. The cabin needed extensive repairs when she arrived, and learning to live without the conveniences of city life had required patience and determination. But gradually, Anna had found a rhythm that suited her. She rose with the sun, spent her days exploring the trails that crisscrossed her property, and collected specimens that caught her eye, not for any scientific purpose now, but simply because their beauty or unusual formations spoke to something deep within her. Her collection had grown steadily over the years, filling shelves and display cases throughout the cabin. Each stone told a story of a particular day, a moment of discovery, a connection between herself and the ancient forces that had shaped this landscape. She documented each find in a weathered leather journal, noting the location, date, and her observations about the specimen's characteristics. The townspeople of Cedar Falls, 20 minutes down the winding mountain road, had never quite known what to make of her. When she first arrived, there had been curious questions about her plans for the property. Some had assumed she would develop it or sell to developers who would build vacation homes for wealthy city dwellers. When months passed and Anna simply continued living quietly with her dog, the questions had turned to whispered speculation. Her weekly trips to town for supplies had become exercises in polite endurance. At Morrison's general store, conversations would halt when she entered, resuming in lower tones after she passed. She'd overhear fragments. That woman living up on Crawford Mountain, shamed to see good land go to waste, collecting rocks like some kind of hermit. The judgment stung initially. But Anna had learned to find strength in her choices rather than validation from others. Tom Morrison, the store's owner, had always been kind enough, though she could see the pity in his eyes when he rang up her modest purchases. His wife, Linda, made efforts at friendly conversation that felt forced and uncomfortable. They meant well, Anna knew, but their concern was rooted in an assumption that her life was somehow incomplete or misguided. "Finding everything you need up there?" Tom would ask, as if expecting her to admit some failing in her chosen lifestyle. "More than enough," Anna would reply truthfully, though she could see he didn't understand her meaning. The younger townspeople were less diplomatic. She'd caught teenagers pointing and whispering when she walked Scout through the small downtown area. To them, she represented something they couldn't fathom, a choice to step away from progress and achievement, in favor of something they saw as pointless isolation. But Anna's expertise in geology hadn't diminished during her years on the mountain. If anything, her understanding had deepened through daily interaction with the rock formations that defined her property. She'd identified several interesting mineral veins during her explorations, noting unusual coloration in crystal, structures that spoke to the area's complex geological history. The land itself was remarkable, a section of mountainside, where ancient volcanic activity and subsequent geological upheaval had created conditions for unique mineral formation. Anna's trained eye could read the story written in stone. Pressure and time had worked together to create something beautiful and rare. Her great-grandmother's property encompassed nearly 200 acres of rugged terrain, from the gentle slopes near the cabin to steep rocky outcroppings that required careful climbing to explore. Anna had spent years learning every trail, every stream, every hidden valley within her boundaries. Scout had proven an excellent companion for these expeditions, his sure footing and keen senses helping them navigate challenging terrain safely. As the morning light strengthened, Anna closed the wooden box and stood to begin her day. She had planned to explore the eastern section of her property today, an area where she'd noticed some interesting quartz formations during her last visit. Scout immediately recognized the signs of preparation for an expedition. His tail wagging with anticipation, she packed her field kit, a small hammer, magnifying glass, sample bags, and her journal into a worn canvas backpack. These tools had been with her since her consulting days, though she used them now for personal satisfaction rather than professional obligation. The walk to the eastern boundary took them through a grove of aspens whose leaves rustled with the slightest breeze, creating a sound like distant conversation. Anna paused frequently to examine interesting specimens, occasionally collecting samples that caught her attention. Scout ranged ahead, investigating scents and sounds that escaped human perception, but never straying far from her side. Near a small clearing where wildflowers bloomed in defiant splashes of color, Anna noticed something that made her stop. The rock face here showed clear signs of mineral veining, thin lines of different colored stone that indicated the presence of various metals and minerals. Her geological training kicked in automatically as she studied the formation, noting the patterns that spoke of substantial deposits beneath the surface. She'd seen similar formations during her consulting work, usually in areas that mining companies found very interesting indeed. The thought brought a small smile to her face. Here she was, living on land that might contain significant mineral wealth, and she was content to simply observe and appreciate it rather than exploit it. As they made their way back to the cabin in the late afternoon, Anna reflected on the strange turns her life had taken 10 years ago. She'd been part of a world that measured success in contracts secured and profits generated. Now, her greatest satisfaction came from moments like this morning's discovery, a beautiful mineral formation that would remain untouched, appreciated for its own sake rather than its market value. That evening, as she updated her collection journal by lamplight, Anna found herself thinking about her great-grandmother's stories again. The old woman had spoken of the mountain's special nature, with a conviction that had seemed almost mystical to young Anna. Now, after years of intimate familiarity with this land, she was beginning to understand what her great-grandmother might have meant. Scout lay beside her chair, occasionally lifting his head when night sounds drifted through the open windows. The mountain settled around them, with the comfortable sighs of an old house finding rest. Outside, the silence stretched vast and deep, holding secrets that revealed themselves only to those patient enough to listen. Anna closed the journal and prepared for bed, unaware that tomorrow would bring a discovery that would challenge everything she thought she knew about her chosen life and the wisdom of her great-grandmother's choices. The mountain had been patient for decades, holding its secrets close. But some secrets have their own timing, and Scout's restless energy the next day would prove that the mountain was finally ready to reveal what it had been protecting all along. Scout's behavior had been unusual all morning. Instead of his typical eager exploration of familiar trails, he kept returning to the same spot near the cabin's foundation, whining softly and pawing at the earth with persistent determination. Anna initially attributed his fixation to some small animal that had burrowed beneath the old logs, but as the hours passed, his intensity only increased. "What is it, boy?" she asked, kneeling beside him as he continued to dig at the packed earth. His worn leather collar, bearing the brass nameplate she'd had engraved 6 years ago, caught the afternoon sunlight as he worked. Scout had always been intuitive about the mountain's moods and mysteries, often leading her to interesting geological formations during their walks. But this was different, more urgent, as if he sensed something important hidden just beneath the surface. Anna studied the area where Scout was digging. The spot was unremarkable at first glance, just a patch of ground between the cabin's foundation and a cluster of pine trees. But as she looked more carefully, she noticed subtle differences in the soil composition and the way water had settled after recent rains. Her geological training kicked in, reading the landscape with practiced eyes. "All right, let's see what you found," she murmured. Retrieving a small spade from her tool shed, the first few inches yielded nothing unusual, typical mountain soil mixed with decomposed organic matter. But as Anna dug deeper, following Scout's lead, her spade struck something solid that rang with a metallic tone. Scout's tail wagged furiously as she carefully excavated around the object, revealing the corner of what appeared to be a buried metal container. Anna's heart rate quickened as she worked to expose more of the object. The container was larger than she'd initially thought, roughly the size of a briefcase and clearly weathered by years underground. Its surface showed the green patina of aged copper, suggesting it had been buried for decades. The craftsmanship was old-fashioned but solid, built to withstand the elements and protect whatever lay inside. With Scout watching intently, Anna carefully lifted the container from its earthen hiding place. It was heavier than expected, and she could hear objects shifting inside when she moved it. The latch was corroded but still functional, though it took considerable effort to work it open. Inside, wrapped in oiled canvas that had preserved them remarkably well, Anna found a collection of documents that made her breath catch. The papers were yellowed with age but still legible, detailed surveyor's maps of her property dating from the 1940s, official geological reports with government seals, and correspondence between what appeared to be mining engineers and federal agencies. Anna spread the documents on her kitchen table, studying them with growing amazement. The maps showed her property in extraordinary detail, marking elevation changes, water sources, and most importantly, areas designated with symbols she recognized from her professional training, indicators of potential mineral deposits. The geological reports were even more revealing. Written in the technical language she knew well, they documented extensive mineral surveys conducted during World War II, when the government had been desperately seeking domestic sources of strategic materials. According to these documents, her property contained significant deposits of rare earth minerals, elements that had been crucial for wartime manufacturing and were now even more valuable in the modern technological age. One report, stamped with official government seals and marked confidential, detailed findings that made Anna's hands tremble as she read. The surveyor had documented veins of minerals that included not just common metals, but rare elements worth enormous sums by today's market standards. The estimated value, even by 1940s calculations, ran into millions of dollars. Scout lay beside her chair as Anna pored over the documents, occasionally lifting his head as if checking her reaction to these revelations. She found herself looking at her dog with new appreciation. Somehow, his instincts had led them to a discovery that would have remained buried indefinitely without his persistent digging. The implications began to sink in slowly. For 10 years, Anna had been living on land that contained mineral wealth beyond her imagination. All those rocks she'd collected during her daily walks, the interesting formations she'd documented in her journal, she'd been surrounded by genuine treasure, while the townspeople mocked her for collecting worthless stones. A mixture of vindication and overwhelming responsibility washed over her. The dismissive comments from Cedar Falls residents took on a bitter irony. The woman they pitied for wasting her life on a pile of rocks was actually sitting on deposits worth potentially tens of millions of dollars. But with this knowledge came a flood of questions and concerns that made Anna's stomach tighten with anxiety. Why had these documents been buried rather than filed with official records? Who else might know about these deposits? And most importantly, what was she supposed to do with information that could change her life so dramatically? Anna examined her stone collection with new eyes, pulling specimens from their display cases and studying them under her magnifying glass. Several pieces that she'd valued purely for their aesthetic beauty now revealed themselves as potentially valuable minerals. A chunk of rock she'd found near the eastern boundary showed clear signs of rare earth content. Another specimen from the northern trail contained metallic veining that could represent significant value. The weight of the discovery pressed down on her as evening approached. She'd spent 10 years finding peace in simplicity, building a life based on personal satisfaction rather than material wealth. Now she faced the possibility that her choice to live modestly had been made while sitting unknowingly on a fortune that could solve every financial concern for the rest of her life. Yet the thought of exploitation troubled her deeply. The land had given her so much: peace, purpose, connection to her family's history, and a sense of belonging she'd never found in the city. The idea of strip mining or industrial extraction felt like a betrayal of everything that had drawn her to this place. Scout seemed to sense her internal turmoil, pressing against her leg with warm, reassuring weight. Anna scratched behind his ears, grateful for his steady presence, as her mind raced through possibilities and complications. She thought about her great-grandmother's stories again, wondering if the old woman had known about these buried documents. The property had been in the family for over a century, passed down through generations who had consistently refused to sell despite numerous offers. Had they known? Had they deliberately chosen to keep the mineral wealth hidden, prioritizing land preservation over profit? As night fell, Anna secured the documents in her great-grandmother's wooden box, placing them alongside the family letters and deeds that had always seemed like simple historical curiosities. Now they felt like pieces of a larger puzzle, one that might explain why her family had held on to this remote mountain property with such determination. The discovery changed everything and nothing simultaneously. The mountain was still the same place that had offered her refuge and peace. Scout was still her faithful companion, his instincts proving more valuable than any surveyor's equipment. But now Anna carried knowledge that felt both precious and dangerous, information that could attract attention she'd spent 10 years avoiding. She made 2 decisions before going to bed that night. First, she would tell no one about the discovery until she understood its full implications. Second, she would continue her daily routines exactly as before, giving herself time to process this revelation without external pressure or influence. But as Anna lay in bed, listening to the familiar night sounds of the mountain, she couldn't escape the feeling that Scout's discovery had started something that would be impossible to control. The mountain had kept its secrets for decades, and now those secrets belonged to her. The question was whether she could keep them safe, or if the knowledge would ultimately prove too powerful to contain. Anna spent the following morning studying the 1940s geological survey maps with the methodical attention she'd once brought to professional consultations. Spread across her kitchen table, the detailed topographical charts revealed information that transformed her understanding of the land she'd called home for a decade. These maps marked mineral veins with precise notations that spoke to their creator's expertise. Each symbol represented specific geological formations, deposits of rare earth elements that had strategic importance during wartime and had only grown more valuable in the modern era of advanced technology. Anna traced the marked areas with her finger, realizing that several corresponded to locations where she'd found particularly interesting specimens. During her daily walks, her geological training allowed her to interpret the technical language and symbols that would have been meaningless to most people. The surveyors had identified deposits of neodymium, europium, and terbium, elements essential for everything from wind turbines to smartphone screens. In the 1940s, these materials had been crucial for military applications. Today, they represented the foundation of green technology and digital innovation. Anna retrieved her collection journal and began cross-referencing her documented finds with the locations marked on the historical maps. The correlation was remarkable. Many of her most aesthetically pleasing specimens had come from areas the wartime surveyors had identified as significant mineral deposits. Her intuitive attraction to certain locations had unknowingly led her to the most valuable parts of her property. She pulled several stones from her display cases, examining them with new understanding. A piece of reddish rock she'd collected from the Eastern Trail showed clear signs of rare earth content when studied under magnification. The metallic flecks she'd admired for their beauty were actually indicators of elements worth hundreds of dollars per pound. The magnitude of the discovery began to crystallize as Anna calculated rough estimates based on the survey data. Conservative projections suggested mineral deposits worth millions of dollars lay beneath her property. More optimistic assessments pushed the potential value into tens of millions, wealth beyond anything she'd ever imagined possessing. But with this knowledge came a growing weight of responsibility that made Anna's chest tight with anxiety. She'd chosen this mountain refuge specifically to escape the pressures and complications of her former life. Now she faced decisions that could affect not only her own future, but the fate of the land that had given her so much peace. The documents revealed more than just mineral locations. Correspondence between government agencies and private contractors suggested that extraction had been considered but ultimately abandoned due to wartime priorities shifting elsewhere. The project had been classified and then apparently forgotten as national. Attention moved to other strategic concerns. Anna found herself wondering why her great-grandmother had never mentioned these buried documents. Had the old woman known about the mineral wealth? The family stories about the land's special nature took on new meaning in light of this discovery. Perhaps her great-grandmother's refusal to sell the property hadn't been mere sentimentality but informed choice, a deliberate decision to protect something valuable from exploitation. Memories surfaced of childhood visits when her great-grandmother had spoken about the importance of preserving the land for future generations. At the time, Anna had interpreted these comments as general environmental consciousness. Now she wondered if they represented specific knowledge about what lay beneath the mountain's surface. Scout wandered over to where Anna sat surrounded by papers, placing his head on her knee with the intuitive understanding that had led to yesterday's discovery. She scratched behind his ears, grateful for his steady presence as her mind worked through the implications of their find. The question of what to do with this information dominated Anna's thoughts. Professional verification would be the logical next step, confirming the survey data through modern testing methods and establishing current market values for the identified minerals. But verification would require involving other people, and Anna wasn't ready to risk exposure until she better understood her options. She spent the afternoon walking her property with new awareness, visiting locations marked on the historical maps and examining them with trained geological observation. The evidence was overwhelming. Subtle indicators of significant mineral deposits were visible to anyone with the expertise to recognize them. Anna had seen these signs countless times during her daily walks but had never pursued their implications. Content to appreciate the land's natural beauty without considering its commercial potential. At a site marked prominently on the survey maps, Anna found clear evidence of rare earth deposits in the form of unusual soil coloration and distinctive rock formations. A small outcropping showed the telltale signs of mineralization that would have mining companies extremely interested. If they knew it existed, the irony wasn't lost on her that she'd been dismissed by townspeople as someone who'd wasted her life collecting worthless rocks while unknowingly living on mineral deposits worth more than all their properties combined. The validation felt hollow, though. What good was being right if it meant compromising everything that had made her choice worthwhile? As evening approached, Anna returned to the cabin with a heavy heart and a mind churning with possibilities. The documents had revealed treasure beyond imagination, but they'd also exposed her to risks she wasn't prepared to face. Knowledge of this magnitude couldn't remain secret indefinitely, and once it became public, her quiet mountain life would be forever changed. She thought about the mining companies she'd worked with during her consulting career, remembering their aggressive pursuit of profitable opportunities and their tendency to overwhelm small property owners with financial pressure and legal maneuvering. The idea of facing such forces alone was daunting, especially given what she now knew about the value of her land. That night, Anna made a difficult decision. She would need professional verification of the survey findings, but she would approach it carefully and discreetly. Too much was at stake to proceed without expert confirmation, but too much could be lost if she moved carelessly. She researched geological consultants who specialized in rare earth minerals, looking for someone with appropriate credentials who might be willing to conduct a discreet assessment. After several hours of online investigation, Anna identified Dr. Patricia Haywood, a retired university geologist with extensive experience in mineral evaluation and a reputation for integrity. Dr. Haywood's credentials were impressive. Decades of academic research, consultation work for government agencies, and a track record of ethical practice that suggested she could be trusted with sensitive information. More importantly, her retirement status meant she wouldn't be beholden to mining companies or other commercial interests that might complicate the situation. Anna composed a careful email to Dr. Haywood, explaining that she owned mountain property in Colorado and had discovered what appeared to be significant geological formations that warranted professional evaluation. She avoided mentioning the historical documents or the specific nature of her discoveries, simply requesting a discreet consultation about mineral assessment. As she prepared for bed, Anna reflected on how dramatically her life had changed in just 24 hours. Scout's instinctive digging had uncovered not just buried documents, but a new chapter in her mountain existence, one that would test everything she'd learned about herself during her decade of chosen solitude. The mountain held the same peaceful silence it always had, but Anna now understood that beneath that tranquil surface lay secrets that could transform her modest life into something entirely different. Whether that transformation would be blessing or curse remained to be seen. Dr. Hayward's response arrived faster than Anna had expected, expressing professional interest and proposing a visit within the week. The retired geologist's email was carefully worded, acknowledging the sensitive nature of Anna's request and confirming her ability to conduct discreet assessments for private landowners. Her willingness to travel to Anna's remote location suggested she understood the importance of confidentiality. Anna spent the intervening days conducting her own field surveys across the property, using her professional field testing kit to gather preliminary data about the mineral deposits. The equipment felt familiar in her hands, tools she'd used countless times during her consulting career but hadn't touched for professional purposes in over a decade. Scout proved an invaluable companion during these surveys, his instincts leading them to several locations that weren't marked on the historical maps, but showed clear signs of mineralization. Anna began to suspect that the wartime surveyors had only scratched the surface of what the property contained, their work limited by the technology and time constraints of the 1940s. At a site near the northern boundary of her land, Anna discovered formations that made her pulse quicken with excitement and apprehension. The rock face showed extensive veining of rare earth minerals in concentrations that would be considered extraordinarily valuable by modern standards. Her preliminary tests confirmed the presence of elements that commanded premium prices in today's technology-driven markets. The emotional weight of these discoveries grew with each day. Anna found herself looking at her peaceful mountain refuge through a different lens, seeing not just natural beauty, but enormous commercial potential. The knowledge felt like a burden that grew heavier each time she uncovered additional evidence of the property's hidden wealth. Her daily routines continued unchanged: morning coffee on the deck, walks with Scout, evening journaling. But now these familiar activities carried an undercurrent of tension. Anna felt as though she was living with a secret too large to contain indefinitely, yet too dangerous to share carelessly. She thought often about her great-grandmother during these days of discovery, wondering what the old woman would have counseled in this situation. The family stories about protecting the land's special nature resonated with new meaning as Anna grappled with the responsibility of stewarding something far more valuable than she'd ever imagined. The magnitude of potential wealth was staggering. Conservative estimates based on her field testing suggested mineral deposits worth at least $20 million. More optimistic projections pushed the value much higher, into figures that could fund conservation efforts or community development projects on a scale Anna had never contemplated. But with that potential came equally staggering risks. Mining operations would transform her peaceful mountain into an industrial site, destroying the ecosystem that had drawn her here and obliterating the sense of sanctuary that had sustained her for a decade. The irony was bitter. Her greatest discovery could lead to the destruction of everything she valued about her chosen life. Scout seemed to sense her internal turmoil, staying closer than usual during their walks and watching her with intelligent eyes that reflected concern. His role in uncovering this life-changing information hadn't been lost on Anna, and she found herself grateful for his presence during moments when the weight of decision-making felt overwhelming. Dr. Hayward arrived on a crisp Thursday morning, driving a practical SUV equipped for mountain travel. Anna liked her immediately, a woman in her 70s with steel grey hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She radiated the confidence of someone who had spent decades studying the Earth's secrets. Her manner was professional but warm, putting Anna at ease, despite the gravity of their meeting. "This is beautiful country," Dr. Hayward commented as Anna led her to the first survey site. "I can see why you chose to make your home here." Anna appreciated that the geologist didn't ask probing questions about her background or motivations for seeking mineral assessment. Their conversation remained focused on technical matters as they examined various locations across the property. Dr. Hayward taking samples and making detailed notes about formations and mineral indicators. The professional consultation took most of the day, with Dr. Hayward's expertise confirming and expanding upon Anna's preliminary findings. At each site, the geologist's excitement became more evident, though she maintained professional composure throughout the survey process. "I'll need to conduct laboratory analysis of these samples," Dr. Hayward explained as they concluded their fieldwork. "But based on what I've observed today, you're sitting on something quite remarkable. The geological formations here are exceptional, the kind of rare earth deposits that mining companies spend years searching for." That evening, as they sat on Anna's deck sharing a simple dinner, Dr. Hayward's professional demeanor relaxed enough to reveal her genuine amazement at the day's discoveries. "In 40 years of geological work, I've rarely seen mineral concentrations like what you have here," she admitted. "The variety and quality of rare earth elements is extraordinary. You're looking at deposits that could be worth tens of millions of dollars, possibly more." The confirmation of Anna's estimates brought both relief and renewed anxiety. Having professional validation meant she wasn't deluding herself about the magnitude of her discovery, but it also made the situation feel more real and urgent. Dr. Hayward continued with information that made Anna's stomach clench with apprehension. "These elements are in high demand for renewable energy technology, electronics manufacturing, and defense applications. Once word gets out about deposits like these, you'll attract attention from major mining corporations. They can be quite aggressive in their pursuit of profitable opportunities." The warning hung heavy in the mountain air as Anna processed its implications. A decade of peaceful isolation was built on anonymity and the general assumption that her property held nothing of commercial value. Discovery of significant mineral wealth would shatter that protection, exposing her to pressures she'd deliberately chosen to avoid. "What would you do in my situation?" Anna asked, though she suspected Dr. Hayward would avoid giving personal advice about such a complex decision. The older woman was quiet for a long moment, studying the mountain landscape that stretched endlessly beyond Anna's property boundaries. "That's not a question I can answer for you," she finally replied. "But I will say this. Once this information becomes public, your life will change dramatically. If you value what you have here, you might want to consider very carefully how you proceed." That night, after Dr. Hayward had departed with promises to provide detailed laboratory results within days, Anna sat alone with Scout on her deck, staring up at stars that seemed dimmed by the weight of knowledge. The mountain held the same peaceful silence it always had, but Anna understood that this tranquility was more fragile than she'd ever realized. The choice ahead of her was becoming clear, though no less difficult for its clarity. She could pursue the mineral wealth and transform her modest mountain life into something entirely different, or she could find ways to protect the land's secrets and preserve the sanctuary that had sustained her for a decade. Either path would require courage, but Anna was beginning to understand that the decision would define not just her future, but her understanding of what truly constituted wealth. Dr. Hayward's detailed report arrived 5 days later, confirming Anna's most optimistic estimates and adding new layers of complexity to her situation. The laboratory analysis revealed not only the presence of valuable rare earth elements, but concentrations that exceeded commercial mining thresholds by substantial margins. The professional assessment placed the total estimated value of mineral deposits at $47 million, wealth beyond Anna's most extravagant imagination. The geologist's business card, which Anna had tucked into her great-grandmother's wooden box alongside the historical documents, now felt like a lifeline to expertise she desperately needed. Dr. Hayward had included detailed recommendations about proceeding with such a discovery, emphasizing the importance of legal protection and careful planning before taking any action that might expose the property's value to outside interests. Mineral rights of this magnitude attract attention from major extraction companies, Dr. Hayward had written in her cover letter. These corporations employ sophisticated methods for identifying promising properties and can be extremely aggressive in their acquisition strategies. I strongly advise you to establish legal protections before word of these deposits becomes public knowledge. The report also detailed the extraction challenges that would be involved in accessing the minerals. Despite their enormous value, the deposits were embedded in complex geological formations that would require extensive mining operations to access. Any commercial extraction would necessitate significant environmental disruption, permanently altering the mountain landscape that Anna had come to love. Anna spent hours studying the technical diagrams and projections, trying to reconcile the enormous potential wealth with the devastating environmental costs required to access it. The contrast was stark. Financial security beyond measure on one hand, complete destruction of her chosen sanctuary on the other. The professional confirmation brought unexpected emotional challenges. For 10 years, Anna had built her sense of self around the choice to live simply and find satisfaction in non-material pursuits. Now she faced the reality that her modest lifestyle had been sustained while sitting unknowingly on a fortune that could solve every financial concern for generations of her family. Yet the thought of exploitation continued to trouble her deeply. The land had offered her refuge during the most difficult period of her life, providing peace and purpose when grief over Richard's death had threatened to overwhelm her. The idea of strip mining or industrial development felt like a profound betrayal of the relationship she'd developed with this place. Scout seemed to sense her internal struggle, staying close during their daily walks and watching her with the intelligent concern that had characterized their partnership since the initial discovery. Anna found herself grateful for his steady presence as she wrestled with decisions that would affect not only her own future, but the fate of the mountain ecosystem they both called home. The weight of responsibility grew heavier each day. Anna had never asked for this burden of choice, but Scout's instinctive digging had placed her in a position where her decisions would determine whether $47 million worth of rare earth minerals remained safely buried or became the target of major extraction operations. She thought often about her great-grandmother's stories during this period, searching for clues about how previous generations of her family had approached stewardship of this land. The old woman's emphasis on preserving the property for future generations took on new significance in light of the mineral discovery. Had her family known about the deposits all along? Had they deliberately chosen preservation over profit for reasons Anna was only beginning to understand? The historical documents revealed that extraction had been seriously considered during World War II, when strategic materials were desperately needed for the war effort. Yet the project had been abandoned despite the potential value, suggesting that other factors had influenced the decision. Anna wondered if environmental concerns or family resistance had played a role in protecting the deposits from wartime extraction. Dr. Hayward's report included warnings about maintaining absolute secrecy until Anna decided how to proceed. Mining companies employed scouts who monitored property transactions, geological surveys, and even local gossip for indications of valuable mineral discoveries. Once word spread about deposits of this magnitude, Anna could expect intense pressure from multiple corporate interests seeking to acquire mining rights. The thought of facing such corporate pressure filled Anna with dread. Her consulting experience had given her insight into how mining companies operated. They possessed resources and legal expertise that could overwhelm individual property owners through relentless negotiation tactics and financial pressure. The idea of her peaceful mountain refuge becoming the center of such attention was deeply unsettling. Anna began researching legal options for protecting her property from unwanted development, discovering that conservation easements and environmental protections could provide some defense against mining interests. But these legal mechanisms required careful navigation and professional guidance, areas where her geological expertise offered little help. The isolation she'd chosen for personal healing now felt like a vulnerability. Living alone on remote mountain property had provided peace and sanctuary, but it also meant facing these momentous decisions without close family or trusted advisors nearby. The weight of choice seemed enormous for one person to bear, especially when the consequences would be irreversible. She found herself walking the property with new awareness, visiting locations marked in Dr. Hayward's report and trying to imagine how industrial extraction would transform these familiar landscapes. The mental images were disturbing. Her quiet trails replaced by access roads, her peaceful meadows converted to processing facilities, her crystal-clear streams polluted by mining runoff. Yet the potential benefits of such wealth were equally compelling. $47 million could fund conservation efforts on a massive scale, support environmental research, or establish educational programs that would benefit countless people. The money could also ensure Anna's own security for life, eliminating financial concerns that occasionally surfaced despite her chosen simplicity. The ethical dimensions of the choice became more complex the longer Anna considered them. Was it responsible to leave such valuable resources unused when they could fund beneficial projects? Did she have the right to make that decision alone? Or did the community and wider society have legitimate interests in accessing materials crucial for renewable energy technology? These philosophical questions haunted Anna's quiet evenings, making her usual peaceful routines feel weighted with unresolved tension. Scout's discovery had opened doors to possibilities she'd never imagined, but it had also burdened her with responsibilities she wasn't sure she was equipped to handle. As days passed, Anna noticed subtle changes in her daily experience of the mountain. Places that had once represented pure natural beauty now also symbolized enormous commercial value. Her rock collection took on new meaning as she recognized specimens that confirmed Dr. Hayward's findings. Even her simple cabin felt different, knowing it sat atop mineral deposits worth more than most people would earn in multiple lifetimes. The transformation wasn't entirely negative. There was satisfaction in understanding that her geological instincts had been sound all along. Her attraction to certain formations and her appreciation for specific mineral specimens had been rooted in professional expertise that recognized true value even when she wasn't consciously seeking it. But the knowledge also created a sense of urgency that hadn't existed in her previous mountain existence. The secret felt too large to keep indefinitely, yet too dangerous to share carelessly. Anna understood that once she took any action based on this information, her decade of peaceful anonymity would end forever. Dr. Hayward's business card represented both opportunity and risk, connection to expertise she needed, but also potential exposure to scrutiny she wanted to avoid. Every decision from this point forward would carry consequences that extended far beyond her personal preferences, affecting the mountain ecosystem, her own future security, and potentially the interests of people she'd never met. As Anna prepared for bed on the 10th day since Scout's discovery, she reflected on how completely her life had been transformed by a few buried documents and her dog's persistent instincts. The mountain remained unchanged, its ancient silence holding the same peace it always had. But Anna's relationship to this place had evolved in ways that would require courage and wisdom to navigate wisely. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a courier service that required Anna's signature and seemed oddly formal for someone living in mountain isolation. The envelope bore the letterhead of Apex Resource Development Corporation, a name Anna didn't recognize, but which carried the unmistakable authority of major corporate correspondence. Preliminary interest was typed across the top of the official document inside, followed by language that made Anna's blood run cold. The mining company expressed interest in discussing potential development opportunities on her property, citing geological surveys indicating significant mineral potential in your area. The letter was carefully worded to sound casual and exploratory, but Anna's consulting experience allowed her to read between the lines. This was the opening move in what could become an aggressive acquisition campaign. The timing felt impossibly coincidental. Only Dr. Hayward knew the specifics of Anna's discovery, and the geologist's reputation and retirement status made it unlikely she would have leaked confidential information. Yet somehow, word of the mineral deposits had reached corporate interests with startling speed. Anna's hands trembled as she read the letter multiple times, searching for clues about how her secret had been compromised. Scout sensed her distress immediately, pressing against her legs as she paced the cabin's small living room. The dog's protective instincts had been heightened since their initial discovery, and he seemed to understand that something threatening had entered their peaceful mountain existence. Anna spent the afternoon researching Apex Resource Development online, discovering a corporation with extensive mining operations across the western United States and a reputation for aggressive land acquisition tactics. Their projects included several controversial operations where small property owners had ultimately sold under pressure after lengthy legal battles. The company's resources were vast. Teams of lawyers, geologists, and negotiators who specialized in acquiring mineral rights from private landowners. The realization that she was now in their sights filled Anna with a fear that penetrated deeper than concern for her own welfare. She'd witnessed how mining companies operated during her consulting career, understanding their capacity to overwhelm individual resistance through relentless pressure and superior resources. The peaceful isolation that had protected her for a decade now felt like vulnerability rather than sanctuary. Paranoia began creeping into her daily routines. Anna found herself checking for unfamiliar vehicles on the mountain road that led to her property, listening for sounds that might indicate surveillance, and wondering if her phone conversations were being monitored. The sense of being watched grew stronger each day, though she couldn't identify specific evidence to support her concerns. Scout's behavior supported her suspicions. During their walks, he remained more alert than usual, his ears pricked for sounds that Anna couldn't detect. Twice, he led her to positions where they could observe the access road without being seen, his body language suggesting the presence of strangers in their territory. Anna began taking precautions that would have seemed absurd just weeks earlier. She varied her daily routines to avoid predictable patterns, kept curtains drawn more often, and started parking her truck in different locations around the property. The measures felt like reasonable responses to legitimate threats, though she recognized they represented a fundamental change in how she experienced her mountain home. The violation of her privacy extended beyond personal discomfort to philosophical outrage. For 10 years, Anna had lived peacefully without bothering anyone, asking nothing from society except to be left alone with her choices. Now, corporate interests were intruding on that solitude based on resources she'd never intended to exploit, forcing her into conflicts she'd specifically chosen to avoid. She thought about calling Dr. Hayward for advice, but hesitated out of concern that the geologist's communications might be monitored. The corporate letter's timing suggested sophisticated intelligence gathering, possibly including surveillance of anyone who might have conducted geological assessments in the area. Anna's isolation, which had once felt like protection, now seemed to leave her exposed to pressures she wasn't equipped to handle alone. The letter had requested a response within 30 days, couched in language that made refusal seem unreasonable while avoiding anything that could be construed as direct threats. Anna recognized the strategy, establish contact, appear reasonable and professional, then gradually increase pressure until resistance became more costly than cooperation. Yet responding at all would acknowledge their claims about mineral potential, potentially validating their interest and inviting more aggressive pursuit. Ignoring the letter might buy time, but could also escalate their efforts to gather information through other means. Every option carried risks that Anna felt unprepared to evaluate. Sleep became elusive as she wrestled with decisions that seemed to offer no clearly beneficial outcomes. The mountain's peaceful silence, which had once provided comfort, now felt heavy with unseen threats. Anna lay awake, listening to night sounds, wondering if human watchers had joined the natural rhythm of creatures moving through darkness. Scout remained close during these restless nights, his protective presence offering reassurance even as his alertness confirmed that their mountain sanctuary was no longer the private refuge it had been. Anna found herself grateful for his companionship. In ways that went beyond their usual partnership, he was her early warning system and her emotional anchor during a crisis that threatened to overwhelm her capacity for clear thinking. 3 days after the letter's arrival, Anna spotted tire tracks on a rarely used trail that crossed the eastern boundary of her property. The impressions were fresh and appeared to have been made by a heavy vehicle equipped for rough terrain, possibly a surveying truck or geological prospecting equipment. The discovery confirmed her suspicions about unauthorized activity on her land while raising new questions about the extent of corporate interest in her mineral deposits. Anna documented the tire tracks with photographs and measurements, though she wasn't sure what legal recourse might be available for trespassing. The evidence suggested that Apex Resource Development was moving beyond preliminary inquiry to active reconnaissance, gathering information that would support future acquisition efforts. Whether she cooperated or not, the escalation forced Anna to confront the reality that her secret was no longer controllable through caution and discretion. Corporate interests had identified her property as a target, and their resources for pursuing valuable mineral rights exceeded anything she could mobilize in defense. The choice was no longer whether to reveal her discovery, but how to respond to forces that were already moving to exploit it. As evening approached, Anna sat on her deck with Scout beside her, studying the mountain landscape that had been her sanctuary for a decade. The beauty remained unchanged: towering pines, crystal streams, meadows filled with wildflowers. But her relationship to this place had been fundamentally altered by knowledge she'd never sought and attention she desperately wanted to avoid. The next phase of this unwanted conflict would require decisions that challenged everything Anna had learned about herself during her years of chosen solitude. The mining company's letter represented just the beginning of pressures that would test whether her commitment to preserving this mountain sanctuary was strong enough to withstand corporate determination. To exploit its hidden wealth, the hidden compartment revealed itself by accident. Anna was placing Dr. Hayward's report back into her great-grandmother's wooden box when her finger caught on what felt like a loose edge along the box's interior wall. Closer examination revealed a thin seam that suggested a false bottom, a secret space that had remained undetected through decades of family ownership. With careful pressure, the hidden panel slid aside to reveal a leather-bound journal wrapped in the same oiled canvas that had preserved the original document Scout had discovered. Anna's heart raced as she lifted the journal from its hiding place, recognizing her great-grandmother's distinctive handwriting on the weathered cover. Eleanor Crawford, Private Reflections, 1923-1967. The journal's first entry, dated shortly after Eleanor's marriage, described her initial arrival at the mountain property as a young bride. But as Anna read deeper, the entries revealed knowledge that fundamentally changed everything she'd believed about her family's relationship to this land. March 15th, 1943. The government men came again today, more insistent about their mineral surveys. They speak of rare elements beneath our mountain, deposits they claim are crucial for the war effort. Thomas grows tired of their pressure, but I understand what they truly seek goes far beyond wartime necessity. The mountain holds treasures that would attract exploitation long after this war ends. Anna's hands trembled as she continued reading. Entry after entry documented Eleanor's growing understanding of the property's mineral wealth and her deliberate choices to protect it from commercial exploitation. June 3rd, 1943. Received final government assessment today. The deposits are worth more than we could ever have imagined, enough to make our family wealthy beyond reason. But wealth built on destroying this sacred place would be no blessing at all. Thomas and I have decided the mountain's gifts will remain hidden. The journal revealed that Eleanor had not only known about the mineral deposits, but had actively worked to conceal them. She'd hidden the government documents, discouraged further surveys, and carefully cultivated the impression that the property held nothing of commercial value. The family's refusal to sell over subsequent decades hadn't been mere sentimentality. It had been part of a deliberate strategy to protect resources too valuable to exploit. September 12th, 1955. Young Anna visited today, so eager to learn about rocks and minerals. I see in her the same love for this land that has guided our choices. Perhaps one day she will understand why we chose preservation over profit. The mountain will reveal its secrets when the time is right. To someone who will honor what we have protected. Anna read the entry referencing her childhood visits with a mixture of amazement and profound emotion. Her great-grandmother had recognized something in her young granddaughter, a connection to the land that would eventually lead to responsible stewardship of its hidden wealth. The journal's later entries detailed Eleanor's growing concern about mining, companies and their increasingly sophisticated methods for identifying valuable properties. She documented specific encounters with corporate representatives, including early approaches from a company called Consolidated Mountain Resources, a predecessor to modern Apex Resource Development. April 7th, 1962. The mining company has new management, more aggressive than before. They call themselves Apex now, but their methods remain the same. Pressure, intimidation, and promises of wealth that mask their true intentions. They will never understand that some things are worth more than money. The historical connection between Apex Resource Development and decades of pressure on Anna's family explained the company's current knowledge about her property. They had been pursuing these mineral deposits for generations, maintaining institutional memory about valuable resources that the Crawford family had successfully protected through careful secrecy and determined resistance. Eleanor's final entries revealed the full scope of her environmental consciousness and her understanding of what would be lost if the mountain's resources were exploited. November 23rd, 1966. Watched the sun rise from the eastern meadow this morning, knowing that mining would destroy this view forever. The rare earth elements they seek lie beneath the very spots where wildflowers bloom each spring, where deer come to drink from crystal streams. Progress demands sacrifice, they say, but some sacrifices diminish us all. Anna closed the journal with tears streaming down her face, finally understanding the true weight of the choice that faced her. This wasn't simply about personal wealth or environmental preservation. It was about honoring a family, legacy of principled stewardship that had protected irreplaceable natural beauty for generations. Scout lay beside her chair as Anna processed the implications of Eleanor's revelations. Her great-grandmother had faced the same corporate pressure, the same temptation of enormous wealth, and the same choice between exploitation and preservation. The decision to protect the mountain had been made deliberately and maintained consistently across multiple generations. The journal also explained why Eleanor had shared stories about the land's special nature during Anna's childhood visits. Those weren't fanciful tales, but carefully disguised education about the responsibility that would eventually fall to Anna as the property's inheritor. Eleanor had been preparing her granddaughter for stewardship of something far more significant than a simple mountain retreat. Anna's choice to leave Denver and live simply on the mountain property now appeared as the fulfillment of family destiny rather than personal whim. Her geological training, her appreciation for natural beauty, and her decision to resist societal pressure for conventional success had all prepared her for this moment when she would decide the mountain's fate. The historical document Scout had discovered represented more than buried treasure. They were part of a deliberate preservation strategy that had protected valuable resources from exploitation. For over 8 decades, Eleanor had hidden the government surveys not to conceal the mineral wealth, but to prevent it from falling into corporate hands that would prioritize profit over environmental protection. Understanding her family's true intentions transformed Anna's relationship to both the discovery and the choices it demanded. She was no longer a reluctant inheritor of unexpected wealth, but the latest guardian in a lineage of environmental stewards who had chosen preservation over profit across multiple generations. The journal's final entry, written shortly before Eleanor's death, contained a message that seemed directed specifically at Anna, despite being written decades earlier. December 8th, 1967, I pray that whoever inherits this responsibility will understand what we have protected and why our choices matter. The mountain has kept its secrets safe through our family's vigilance. May future generations prove worthy of that trust and wise enough to value what cannot be replaced once it is lost. Anna sat in the evening darkness, surrounded by the mountain silence that Eleanor had loved and protected. The weight of family legacy added profound meaning to decisions she'd been struggling to make in isolation. She was not alone in facing these choices. She was part of a continuum of people who had recognized that some treasures were too valuable to exploit. The corporate pressure from Apex Resource Development took on new significance in light of the journal's revelations. This wasn't random targeting, but the continuation of a conflict that had persisted for generations. Battle between preservation and exploitation that had defined her family's relationship to this land for nearly a century. Scout's discovery had revealed more than mineral deposits and historical documents. It had uncovered a family tradition of environmental stewardship that gave meaning and direction to choices that had previously seemed overwhelming in their isolation. Anna now understood that her decision would either honor or betray a legacy of principled resistance that had protected irreplaceable natural beauty through decades of corporate pressure and social change. The black SUVs arrived 3 days after Anna discovered Eleanor's journal, their occupants dressed in business suits that seemed absurdly formal for mountain terrain. Anna watched from her cabin window as 2 vehicles parked near her property's entrance, their passengers consulting tablets and pointing toward various locations across her land. The hand-forged iron property, stakes her ancestors had placed to mark boundary. Lines seemed suddenly significant, physical, reminders of her family's rightful claim to this contested territory. Scout's protective instincts activated immediately, his low growl vibrating through the cabin as he positioned himself between Anna and the approaching strangers. His alertness confirmed what Anna already knew. These weren't casual visitors but corporate representatives whose presence signaled the escalation she'd been dreading. The lead representative introduced himself as Marcus Webb from Apex Resource Development, his practiced smile and confident handshake suggesting extensive experience in situations like this. His companions remained silent but alert, their presence clearly intended to demonstrate corporate seriousness about the proceedings. Ms. Crawford, thank you for agreeing to meet with us, Webb began, though Anna hadn't agreed to anything. We're here to discuss exciting opportunities that could benefit both you and our company. Significantly, Anna's consulting experience allowed her to recognize the negotiation tactics, immediately assume cooperation, project enthusiasm, and frame exploitation as mutual benefit. She'd witnessed these strategies countless times during her professional career, but experiencing them as a target rather than an observer felt entirely different. "I didn't invite you here," Anna replied quietly, her voice carrying the calm authority she'd learned from years of dealing with aggressive corporate representatives. "This is private property, and you're trespassing." Webb's smile never wavered as he produced official-looking documents from his briefcase. "We have reason to believe your property contains mineral deposits of significant strategic importance. Our geological surveys indicate resources that could be worth tens of millions of dollars, wealth that could transform your circumstances considerably." The revelation that they knew specific details about the mineral deposit sent a chill through Anna's spine. Their knowledge went beyond general speculation to precise understanding of what lay beneath her mountain. Someone had provided them with detailed information, though Anna couldn't determine whether the leak had come from Dr. Hayward's analysis or from their own unauthorized surveys. "We are prepared to offer you $12 million for full mineral rights," Webb continued, clearly expecting his announcement to produce immediate interest. "That's just our opening proposal. We're confident we can reach terms that will exceed your expectations." Anna's silence seemed to unsettle Webb slightly, though he maintained his professional composure. Behind him, his companions studied the cabin and surrounding landscape with appraising eyes that measured everything in terms of commercial potential rather than natural beauty. "I'm not interested in selling," Anna stated firmly, drawing strength from Eleanor's journal and the family legacy it had revealed. "This land has been in my family for generations, and it's not for sale at any price." Webb's expression shifted subtly, revealing calculation beneath his friendly facade. "Ms. Crawford, I understand your emotional attachment to family property, but consider the practical implications. $12 million could fund conservation efforts across thousands of acres, supporting environmental causes far beyond what this single property represents." The argument was sophisticated, acknowledging Anna's apparent environmental consciousness while reframing exploitation as conservation opportunity. She recognized the strategy from her consulting work: identify the target's values and present acquisition as alignment with those principles. "Additionally," Webb continued, "mineral extraction technology has advanced significantly in recent years. Modern operations minimize environmental impact while maximizing resource recovery. You could have both financial benefit and environmental protection." Anna had seen enough mining operations to know that Webb's claims about minimal environmental impact were carefully crafted misrepresentations. Extracting rare earth minerals required massive industrial infrastructure that would permanently transform her mountain sanctuary into something unrecognizable. Dr. Hayward's warnings about corporate pressure tactics proved prophetic as Webb's team revealed the extent of their preparation. They produced detailed geological surveys, environmental impact assessments, and legal precedents, documentation that demonstrated substantial investment in pursuing Anna's mineral rights. "We've also researched similar properties in the region," Webb explained, spreading maps across Anna's kitchen table without invitation. "Property owners who've cooperated with extraction projects have seen tremendous community benefits, job creation, infrastructure improvement, and economic development that benefits everyone." The maps showed Anna's property in relation to other mining operations across Colorado, highlighting the economic impact of resource extraction on rural communities. The presentation was polished and persuasive, clearly designed to address potential objections while emphasizing community benefits over personal gain. But Anna also noticed what the presentation omitted: environmental damage, community displacement, and long-term ecological consequences that persisted long after mining operations concluded. Her geological training allowed her to read between the lines of their sanitized impact assessments, recognizing significant risks that were minimized or ignored entirely. "What happens if I refuse your offer?" Anna asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Webb's pause was telling, his friendly demeanor cooling slightly as he prepared to reveal less pleasant aspects of their approach. "We would be disappointed, of course, but we'd continue pursuing legal options for accessing these strategically important resources. Eminent domain proceedings, environmental necessity arguments, and community benefit assessments could all factor into our approach." The threat was delivered with professional courtesy, but its implications were clear. Apex Resource Development possessed legal and financial resources that could overwhelm individual resistance through prolonged litigation and political pressure. They were offering Anna the choice between cooperation and conquest, disguising coercion as negotiation. Anna's research into Apex's history had revealed exactly these tactics in previous acquisitions. Small property owners often faced years of legal battles that drained their resources, while corporate lawyers pursued every available avenue for forcing access to valuable mineral deposits. The company's success rate suggested that most individuals eventually capitulated under sustained pressure. Yet Eleanor's journal had also documented successful resistance across multiple decades, proving that determined opposition could protect valuable resources from corporate exploitation. The Crawford family's strategy had relied on secrecy, legal preparation, and unwavering commitment to principles that transcended immediate financial benefit. "I'll need time to consider your proposal," Anna said finally, recognizing that immediate refusal might provoke more aggressive tactics, while apparent consideration could buy time for preparation. Webb's satisfaction at this response was evident. Though Anna suspected, he interpreted her request for time as weakness rather than strategy. "Of course, this is a significant decision. We'll be staying in Cedar Falls for the next few days, available for any questions or additional discussions you might need." After the corporate representatives departed, Anna sat alone with Scout, processing the encounter's implications. The formal presentation had confirmed her worst fears about Apex's resources and determination, while revealing the sophistication of their approach to unwilling property owners. But the meeting had also strengthened Anna's resolve. Webb's polished arguments and veiled threats reminded her of everything she'd chosen to escape when she left Denver for mountain solitude. The corporate mentality that reduced her family's sanctuary to mineral extraction potential represented exactly the worldview she'd rejected in favor of simpler, more meaningful existence. That evening, Anna contacted Dr. Hayward, explaining the corporate pressure and requesting advice about legal protection for property owners facing aggressive acquisition tactics. The geologist's response was immediate and alarming. Apex Resource Development had contacted her as well, seeking detailed information about Anna's geological assessments. "They offered substantial payment for my survey data," Dr. Hayward explained during their phone conversation. "I refused, of course, but their approach suggests they're building a comprehensive case for acquisition. You'll need legal representation immediately if you want to resist their efforts effectively." The recommendation led Anna to research environmental lawyers who specialized in protecting private property from corporate mining interests. She identified several attorneys with track records of successful resistance to eminent domain proceedings and forced mineral extraction. Though their services would require significant financial resources, the irony wasn't lost on Anna that defending her right to refuse millions of dollars in mineral wealth would itself require substantial financial investment. The legal battle ahead would test not only her commitment to preservation, but her ability to sustain prolonged conflict with opponents whose resources far exceeded her own. As night fell over the mountain, Anna walked the property boundaries with Scout, studying the landscape that Apex Resource Development saw as commercial opportunity, but which represented irreplaceable natural heritage to her family. The hand-forged iron stakes marking property lines seemed to stand sentinel against encroaching threats, physical symbols of boundaries that had been defended successfully for generations. The choice ahead was no longer whether to exploit or preserve the mineral deposits. It was whether Anna possessed the courage and resources to continue her family's tradition of resistance against forces that had grown only more sophisticated and powerful over the decades since Eleanor's time. The mountain's ancient silence held the same peace it always had. But Anna understood that silence was more fragile than she'd ever realized, threatened by interests that saw value only in what could be extracted and sold. Marcus Webb returned exactly 1 week later, this time accompanied by a larger team that included legal representatives, additional executives, and what appeared to be private security personnel. Their presence transformed Anna's peaceful mountain sanctuary into the center of corporate attention she'd spent 10 years avoiding. "Ms. Crawford, I hope you've had sufficient time to consider our generous offer," Webb announced, his tone carrying less patience than during their previous meeting. "We're prepared to increase our proposal to $15 million. Contingent on your agreement to proceed immediately." Anna had spent the intervening week in intensive preparation, consulting with environmental lawyers and researching legal precedents that might protect her property rights. The conversations had been sobering. While her position wasn't hopeless, successful resistance would require substantial resources and unwavering determination over potentially years of litigation. "I've also commissioned an independent environmental impact assessment," Anna replied, producing a thick report from Dr. Hayward's recommended environmental consulting firm. "The findings indicate that mineral extraction would cause irreversible ecological damage to this mountain ecosystem." The environmental impact assessment represented Anna's investment in professional documentation of what she'd intuitively understood, that mining operations would destroy the natural systems that made this place valuable beyond any monetary calculation. The report detailed potential contamination of water sources, destruction of wildlife habitats, and permanent alteration of geological formations that had required millennia to develop. Webb's team had clearly anticipated environmental objections, producing their own studies that minimized ecological concerns while emphasizing economic benefits. Their documentation was polished and persuasive, though Anna's geological training allowed her to identify methodological flaws and optimistic assumptions that understated true environmental costs. "Modern extraction techniques have evolved significantly," Webb insisted, spreading technical diagrams across Anna's kitchen table. "We can access the mineral deposits with minimal surface disruption, preserving most of the aesthetic and ecological features you value." Anna studied the technical plans with professional skepticism, recognizing that minimal disruption was relative to the massive scale of industrial mining operations rather than the pristine mountain environment that currently existed. Even the most conservative extraction scenario would require access roads, processing facilities, and infrastructure that would fundamentally alter the mountain's character. "What about long-term environmental monitoring?" Anna asked, probing the depth of their environmental commitments. "What guarantees do you provide for restoration after extraction concludes?" Webb's hesitation revealed the limits of corporate environmental responsibility. "We comply with all federal and state environmental regulations," he replied carefully. "Our track record demonstrates consistent adherence to required standards." Anna had researched Apex's environmental track record, discovering a pattern of minimal compliance with regulations and legal disputes over restoration responsibilities. Their consistent adherence to required standards translated to doing exactly as little as legally permitted while pursuing maximum extraction efficiency. The meeting's tone shifted as Webb recognized that Anna's resistance wasn't based on emotional attachment, but informed analysis of environmental consequences. His team's approach became more aggressive, presenting economic arguments designed to reframe her concerns as unrealistic idealism. $15 million could fund conservation efforts across thousands of acres, Webb repeated, adding urgency to his previous argument. You could protect far more land than this single property represents, creating environmental benefits that far exceed what you're preserving here. The argument was seductive in its logic, offering Anna the opportunity to transform mineral wealth into conservation funding on a massive scale. But she'd learned from Eleanor's journal that such reasoning had been used to pressure previous generations of her family, always with the promise that exploitation of this particular place could fund protection of others. Anna's response drew directly from her great-grandmother's wisdom. This land has been protected for generations because some places are irreplaceable. The mineral deposits you want to extract lie beneath ecosystems that can't be recreated elsewhere. Regardless of how much money becomes available for conservation, Webb's frustration became evident as his team recognized that Anna understood both the environmental science and the economic arguments they were presenting. Her resistance wasn't based on ignorance or sentiment, but informed conviction about values that transcended immediate financial benefit. Miss Crawford, I must be direct with you, Webb said, his professional courtesy finally giving way to corporate pressure. These mineral deposits represent strategic national resources. If you won't accept our generous offer, we'll pursue legal mechanisms for ensuring public access to materials crucial for renewable energy technology and national defense applications. The threat was no longer veiled. Apex resource. Development would use eminent domain proceedings, environmental necessity arguments, and political pressure to force access to Anna's mineral deposits whether she cooperated or not. Their patience for negotiation had limits, and Anna had apparently reached them. Scout sensed the escalating tension, positioning himself protectively between Anna and the corporate representatives whose presence had transformed her cabin into a battleground. His alertness reflected Anna's own understanding that this meeting represented the moment when polite negotiation would give way to legal warfare. The choice Anna faced was no longer between wealth and environmental protection. It was between surrender and resistance against forces that possessed resources she couldn't match but principles she wouldn't abandon. The mountain's mineral treasures had finally attracted the attention Eleanor had successfully avoided for decades, and Anna would need courage that exceeded her great-grandmothers to continue protecting what 3 generations of her family had preserved. Anna's decision crystallized in the moment Marcus Webb finished his threat. Standing in her great-grandmother's cabin, surrounded by corporate representatives who saw her mountain sanctuary as nothing more than mineral extraction opportunity, she understood that some battles were worth fighting, regardless of the odds. Mr. Webb, I'm going to tell you something that might surprise you, Anna said, her voice carrying the quiet authority she'd developed during her consulting career. I've spent enough time in the mining industry to understand exactly what you're proposing and exactly what it would cost, not just in dollars, but in irreplaceable natural heritage. She moved to her desk and retrieved a legal document she'd spent the past week preparing with her environmental attorney. The conservation easement paperwork represented months of complex legal preparation, condensed into urgent action once Anna realized the depth of corporate pressure she faced. I'm establishing a permanent conservation easement on this property, Anna announced, placing the document on the table where Webb's team had spread their mining proposals. This legal protection ensures that the land can never be developed for mineral extraction, regardless of ownership changes or economic pressures. Webb's confident demeanor cracked as he studied the easement documentation. Conservation easements were among the strongest legal protections available for private property, creating binding restrictions that survived ownership transfers and resisted eminent domain proceedings. Ms. Crawford, you're making a serious mistake, Webb said, his professional courtesy completely abandoned. These mineral deposits represent strategic national resources worth tens of millions of dollars. You can't simply lock away materials that could benefit countless people for generations. Anna's response drew strength from Eleanor's journal and the family tradition it had revealed. My great-grandmother faced the same pressure during World War II when these deposits were first discovered. She chose preservation over exploitation then, and I'm making the same choice now. The revelation that Anna's family had known about the mineral deposits for generations clearly surprised Webb's team. Their assumption that she was a naive inheritor suddenly discovering unexpected wealth had guided their entire approach to negotiation. Learning that her resistance represented informed family tradition rather than emotional attachment changed the dynamic completely. You're condemning valuable resources to permanent burial, Webb argued, clearly frustrated by the legal obstacle Anna had created. Future generations will judge you harshly for preventing access to materials crucial for renewable energy development. Anna had wrestled with exactly these questions during her decision-making process. The ethical complexity of preserving resources that could fund beneficial projects had weighed heavily on her conscience. But Eleanor's wisdom and her own geological expertise had convinced her that some forms of wealth couldn't be reclaimed. Once they were destroyed, future generations will also judge us for destroying irreplaceable ecosystems in pursuit of short-term profit, Anna countered. The mineral deposits will remain safely underground, available if humanity develops truly sustainable extraction methods. But once this mountain ecosystem is destroyed, it can never be restored. Scout remained close to Anna's side throughout the confrontation, his protective instincts activated by the tension that filled the cabin. His presence reminded her of the day his digging had started this entire conflict, a discovery that had tested everything she valued about her chosen life. Webb's team attempted various legal arguments against the conservation easement, citing national security interests, economic development priorities, and community benefit considerations. Their arguments were sophisticated, but ultimately ineffective against the legal protections Anna had established with expert guidance. This easement won't survive court challenges, Webb threatened, clearly frustrated by the obstacles Anna had created. We have legal resources that can overwhelm individual property owners through prolonged litigation. Anna's environmental attorney had prepared her for exactly these threats. Conservation easements were difficult to challenge once properly established, especially when they were created voluntarily by property owners rather than imposed by external authorities. The legal protections were designed to withstand precisely the kind of corporate pressure Webb was describing. "You're welcome to try," Anna replied calmly. "But you'll discover that my family has been preparing for this challenge longer than your company has existed. We've protected these resources for generations, and we'll continue protecting them." The meeting concluded with Webb's team departing in obvious frustration, their confident expectations of easy acquisition thoroughly disrupted by Anna's legal preparations and informed resistance. But Anna understood that their departure represented tactical retreat rather than strategic surrender. Apex resource development would likely pursue other avenues for challenging her conservation easement. That evening, Anna sat on her deck with Scout, watching the sunset paint the mountain peaks in shades of gold and purple that no amount of mineral wealth could purchase. The conservation easement document lay on the table beside her, representing both victory and ongoing responsibility. She thought about Eleanor's journal entries, describing similar confrontations with mining interests decades earlier. Each generation of her family had faced pressure to exploit the mountain's hidden wealth, and each had chosen preservation over profit despite the enormous financial temptations involved. The decision brought Anna profound peace that surprised her with its intensity. For weeks, she'd struggled with the weight of choice between environmental protection and financial security. Now that the choice was made, she felt the satisfaction of alignment between her values and her actions, a harmony that no amount of money could have provided. Scout seemed to sense her emotional resolution, his protective alertness relaxing into the comfortable companionship they'd shared for years. His discovery had led to this moment of decision, and his presence had sustained her through the pressure and uncertainty that followed. The mountain settled into evening silence around them, holding its secrets safely beneath Anna's protection. The conservation easement ensured that future generations would inherit not mineral wealth but something far more valuable, a preserved ecosystem that represented the wisdom of choosing long-term environmental health over short-term economic gain. Anna understood that Webb's threats about legal challenges might prove serious, but she also knew that her family's century-long commitment to preservation had created a foundation strong enough to withstand corporate pressure. The battle ahead would test her resources and determination. But the most important choice had been made. The mountain's treasures would remain safely hidden where they belonged. 6 months had passed since Anna established the conservation easement, and the mountain had settled back into the peaceful rhythm she'd cherished for over a decade. Apex Resource Development had indeed pursued legal challenges, but their efforts had proven futile against the solid legal protections Anna had established with expert guidance. The company had eventually moved on to pursue other opportunities, leaving Anna's mountain sanctuary protected and undisturbed. The new trail marker signs Anna had installed throughout the property represented her thoughtful approach to sharing the mountain's beauty without compromising its protection. Simple wooden posts marked hiking paths that allowed respectful public access to selected areas while preserving the most sensitive ecological zones from human impact. The trails offered visitors opportunities to experience the mountain's natural splendor without exposing the hidden mineral deposits to renewed commercial interest. Dr. Hayward had become a regular visitor, collaborating with Anna on a comprehensive geological survey that documented the mountain's mineral formations for scientific rather than commercial purposes. Their work would contribute to academic understanding of rare earth element formation while ensuring that the knowledge remained in protective hands rather than corporate databases. This morning's sample from the Eastern Ridge shows remarkable crystal formation. Dr. Hayward observed during her latest visit, examining specimens under magnification in Anna's cabin. The geological processes that created these deposits represent millions of years of natural artistry that deserves preservation for its own sake. Anna appreciated how Dr. Hayward's scientific perspective reinforced her own conviction about the mountain's value beyond monetary calculation. The geologist's enthusiasm for pure research created a partnership that honored both scientific inquiry and environmental protection without compromising either principle. The academic documentation project had attracted interest from several universities, leading to research proposals that would study the mountain's geology while respecting the conservation easement's restrictions. Anna felt satisfied that the mineral formations would contribute to human knowledge without being destroyed in the process. Scout remained her faithful companion during daily explorations of the protected landscape, his discovery that had started this entire journey now seeming like destiny rather than accident. His instincts continued leading them to interesting formations and beautiful vistas, though Anna no longer felt the weight of decision about what to do with such discoveries. The townspeople of Cedar Falls had gradually learned about Anna's successful resistance to mining development, though she'd carefully avoided revealing the specific mineral wealth that had attracted corporate attention. Their reactions had been mixed, some expressing grudging respect for her principled stand, while others continued viewing her lifestyle choices with skepticism. Tom Morrison at the general store had begun treating Anna with new consideration, apparently recognizing that her mountain retreat represented something more substantial than eccentric isolation. "Heard you sent those mining folks packing," he'd commented during her most recent supply run. "Takes backbone to stand up to corporate pressure like that." Anna had simply nodded, unwilling to discuss details, but grateful for the community's growing understanding that her choices represented conviction rather than mere stubbornness. The shift in local perception felt like validation of principles she'd maintained through years of dismissive commentary. More significantly, several younger residents had approached Anna about her trail system, expressing interest in respectful hiking and nature observation. Their enthusiasm for experiencing the mountain's beauty without exploitation suggested that environmental consciousness was growing even in communities traditionally focused on resource extraction and economic development. Anna had established simple guidelines for trail access, small groups only, no camping or fires, and absolute respect for wildlife and plant communities. The rules ensured that public enjoyment wouldn't compromise the ecological protection that justified preserving the land from mining development. The conservation easement had generated interest from environmental organizations seeking to replicate Anna's successful resistance to mining pressure. She'd spoken at several conferences about the legal strategies and family preparation that had enabled her victory, sharing knowledge that might help other property owners facing similar corporate pressure. These speaking engagements had connected Anna with a community of environmental advocates who shared her conviction that some natural treasures were too valuable to exploit. The relationships had enriched her understanding of conservation challenges, while reinforcing her confidence in the choices she'd made. Eleanor's journal had become Anna's most treasured possession, its wisdom guiding decisions about managing public access while maintaining environmental protection. The journal's insights about balancing preservation with appropriate sharing had inspired Anna's trail system and educational partnerships with visiting researchers. As evening settled over the mountain, Anna sat on her deck, reviewing the day's geological observations in her collection journal. The familiar routine had regained its peaceful character, now that corporate pressure had been permanently resolved through legal protection. Scout lay beside her chair, occasionally lifting his head when wildlife sounds drifted through the mountain silence. His contentment reflected Anna's own satisfaction with the life they'd preserved through principled resistance to forces that would have transformed their sanctuary into something unrecognizable. The mineral deposits remained safely buried beneath hiking trails and wildflower meadows, their enormous monetary value less important than their role in supporting the ecosystem Anna had chosen to protect. Future generations would inherit not depleted mining sites but preserved natural heritage that represented the wisdom of choosing environmental health over immediate profit. Anna's great-grandmother's wooden box sat on the table beside her, containing Eleanor's journal alongside the historical documents that had revealed the mountain's hidden wealth. The family legacy of environmental stewardship would continue through Anna's conservation easement, ensuring that the mountain's secrets remained protected for generations yet to come. The choice between $47 million and irreplaceable natural beauty had tested everything Anna believed about wealth and value. In the end, she'd discovered that the greatest riches came not from exploiting what the mountain could provide, but from protecting what it represented, a sanctuary where natural processes continued unchanged, where beauty existed for its own sake, and where silence held more value than the loudest promises of corporate profit. As stars emerged in the darkening sky, Anna understood that Scout's discovery had led not to unexpected wealth, but to the confirmation of wealth she'd possessed all along. The mountain's peace, the satisfaction of principled choice, and the knowledge that future generations would inherit protected rather than exploited natural heritage, represented treasures no mining operation could ever extract or corporate pressure could ever diminish.